Hello, welcome back to the footprints of our decision. Now, the last time I had just asked my mother in our reading, how do you know God is real? Which was quite provoking. So she asked me in a roundabout way. You find out for yourself. So we're going to pick up and I'm going to begin to read. Meanwhile, a funny thing happened after I got into bed that night. While staring at the ceiling for what seemed like hours, I finally got the nerve to ask God to reveal himself to me. Now, as a child, I had no idea where God would reveal himself in my room. Would he come sooner or later? Would he come fast or slow? So, with the covers pulled up just below my eyes, I waited and waited and waited again. There was no God. Then I got a brilliant idea. Ask God to do something in the room quietly. I looked around and I saw the clock on the wall. I said, God, if you're real, wake me up at 3 a.m. in the morning. That night was the longest night ever. I first fell asleep. Well, I first had to fall asleep for God to wake me up. But I was afraid to go to sleep. After finally falling asleep, I remember my eyes popping open, but my brain seemed frozen with fear. And my eyes were fixed on the clock on the wall that read 3 a.m. Now, by this time, all my little branches were swaying in the wind, another kind of wind. This time a strong but peaceful one. I never told anyone, not even my mother, what happened to me that night. Was this real? Did this really happen? Did God really come into my room and wake me up at 3 a.m.? Throughout the day, doubt followed me like a shadow on a sunny day. So I said, I know, tonight I'll make it harder for God and ask him to wake me up at 3:07 a.m. Then I'll know he's real. So I did. That night I quickly fell asleep because of my long-awaited encounter with God the night before. On this night, I remember waking up shaking. I just knew my little tree would be uprooted and flipped upside down. I looked at the clock and it was exactly 3:07 a.m. Since then, I never asked God again to prove himself to me. However, I encourage all parents to try being an example of prayer instead of telling their children they should pray. If they seem reluctant to get to know God, help them by living out your prayer life before them. The prayers of the righteous will prevail. And I want to take a moment just to tell you about the picture over my shoulder. I viewed an angry God. I grew up thinking about a God that could snatch your life at a moment's notice. I was never taught a loving God. And many of you can attest to this and you know what I'm talking about. Because even in the sermons that we preach and that we hear, God is always sending somebody to hell and we're telling people about hell as opposed to telling them about a loving God. So the image that I had of God in prayer was a angry, mean, progressive God, not a loving God. So when I began to see other pastors and preachers on television talk about our loving God, I was confused. I don't know what God you're talking about, because the God I was taught that I went to church to hear, he was sending folks to hell. How many of you know what I'm talking about? So I want you to know that there is a loving God. There is a God that wants to hear you in prayer. He wants to hear you not just accept him as an authoritative God, but a loving God. By the way, he said, cast all your cares upon him, for he cares for you. So understand this about prayer, and I had to learn for myself. Oh, he's real. And I would just encourage you, if you haven't asked God to prove himself, don't be afraid to see a God like this in this picture, the image in our head, but see a loving God, and he will approach you in a loving way. So listen, God bless you. I need you to follow. I need you to like, share this video. I love you with the truth. God bless.